Right now, without knowing it, every American is receiving a 30% discount on their entire life. Your groceries, your gas, your mortgage, all artificially cheaper than they should be. This discount has a name, it has an address, and it is quietly dying. Quietly, slowly, inevitably. By the end of this video, I will reveal the single trigger event that experts believe could end dollar dominance. And the answer is not a war, not a market crash, but something far simpler and far more unsettling than either. If you have ever sensed that something about the American economy does not quite add up, that we spend more than we earn, borrow more than we produce, and somehow keep getting away with it, stay until the final minute. This video is the answer you have been looking for. In the next 12 minutes, you will understand exactly how the dollar became the world's most powerful financial instrument, why dozens of countries are quietly abandoning it right now, and what the fall of every previous reserve currency in history tells us about what is coming next, and what it means for every price tag in your life. The reserve throne. To understand why the dollar's death matters, you first need to understand what reserve currency status actually is, because most people think of it as prestige. It is not. It is infrastructure. After World War II, 44 nations gathered in a small New Hampshire town called Bretton Woods and made a decision that would reshape the entire global economy. They agreed that all international trade, oil, wheat, steel, semiconductors, would be priced and settled in US dollars. Not gold, not the British pound. One currency rules all. Why America? Because in 1945, the US held 75% of the world's gold reserves and had the only major economy that wasn't bombed into ruins. It seemed logical at the time, but here's what those 44 nations did not fully calculate. When your currency is the world currency, every other nation must hold your money to participate in global trade. They must buy your debt. They subsidize your spending. You get to print money that others actually need. The dollar is our currency, but it's your problem. Nixon's Treasury Secretary said that to European finance ministers in 1971, and it perfectly captures the arrangement. This is the throne. For 80 years, America has sat on it comfortably. But that throne created something even more tangible than power. Something that affects every American's daily life in a way almost nobody discusses. And that is exactly what the next part reveals. The 30% subsidy. Now here's where it gets personal. This is not just about geopolitics and central banks. This is about your grocery bill. French Finance Minister Valéry Giscard d'Estaing coined the phrase exorbitant privilege in the 1960s, and he was genuinely furious when he said it. Reserve currency status gives America something no other country on earth possesses: the ability to buy goods from the rest of the world using money it prints essentially for free. Here is how it works. When Germany wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, Germany must first earn dollars by selling goods to dollar-holding countries or exchanging euros on the currency market. America issues treasury bonds that the whole world lines up to purchase because they need dollars to operate in global trade. Economists estimate this privilege is worth approximately 30% of American purchasing power. That means your $1,000 rent should actually cost $1,300. Your $5 coffee, closer to $6.50. Every imported good, and America imports staggering amounts, will be dramatically more expensive without this subsidy. It is a 30% discount on the entire American lifestyle, paid for by the rest of the world, every single day. If this kind of hidden economic truth disturbs you as much as it should, hit like and subscribe, because we are just getting started. Because what comes next shows this subsidy is already disappearing, piece by piece, country by country, in ways most Americans cannot yet see. De-dollarization. Stop and think about this for a second. The dollar has dominated global trade since 1945, and in just the last 3 years, something unprecedented has started happening with a speed that is genuinely alarming to anyone paying attention. In 2001, the dollar represented 73% of global foreign exchange reserves. By 2023, that number had fallen to 58%, quietly, without major headlines, without a single dramatic crisis. Just a slow, relentless erosion. Countries are moving out. China and Russia settled their bilateral trade entirely in yuan and rubles for the first time in 2022. Brazil and Argentina explored yuan-denominated trade deals. India paid for Russian oil in rupees. Saudi Arabia, America's most critical petrodollar partner for half a century, began openly discussing accepting yuan for oil sales. These are not accidents. These are deliberate decisions made by governments that see what is happening and are positioning before everyone else does. The dollar's share of global trade is falling faster than at any point in the past 2 decades. The International Monetary Fund tracked this carefully in their 2023 data, and the conclusion is unambiguous. The shift is accelerating, not slowing. It is happening like a slow leak in a tire. You barely notice until you are stranded on the side of the road with nowhere to go. But what ignited all of this? What was the single decision in Washington that convinced dozens of countries to start actively replacing the dollar? That answer is one you probably know, but its full consequences are ones almost nobody has calculated. Petrodollar cracks. The dollar did not just become the world's reserve currency because of Bretton Woods. It kept its throne for 50 additional years through a secret agreement with a desert kingdom, an agreement that is now visibly fracturing. In 1974, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger flew to Riyadh and made a deal with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis would price all their oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, America would provide military protection and guaranteed weapons sales. The petrodollar system was born. Oil equals dollars, always. This was a masterstroke of financial architecture. If you need oil, and oil can only be purchased in dollars, then every nation on Earth needs dollars. The demand for dollars became essentially infinite. America could keep printing, keep borrowing, keep running massive trade deficits, and the world still needed what it was printing. For 50 years, this worked flawlessly. Then in 2023, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman sat down with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The Wall Street Journal reported the conversation was explicitly about pricing oil in yuan. The dollar system is like oxygen. When it disappears, you notice immediately. If the petrodollar agreement fractures even partially, it removes the single largest pillar holding up global dollar demand. And the cascade of consequences would land directly in every American's mortgage rate, grocery receipt, and retirement account. But the petrodollar is just one cracking pillar. Countries are simultaneously building something else, a historic insurance policy, and the numbers behind it are unlike anything seen since 1967. Gold rush returns. Now forget everything I just said for a moment, because there is a pattern underneath all of this that is more revealing than any trade number or petrodollar headline. Central banks around the world bought more gold in 2022 than in any year since 1967. Not since the era of the gold standard have governments stockpiled gold this aggressively. China has added to its gold reserves every single month for over 18 consecutive months. Russia, after being severed from the dollar system through swift sanctions, dramatically accelerated its gold purchases. Poland, Singapore, India, Turkey, all buying at record rates. Why does this matter? Because gold is what nations hold when they do not trust paper money. Specifically, when they no longer trust someone else's paper money. This is not investment. This is insurance. Countries are quietly building a financial lifeboat, not because they think the dollar collapses tomorrow, but because they no longer believe it is safe enough to hold exclusively. They are preparing for a world where the dollar is just one currency among many. The 2022 Russia sanctions sent a shockwave through every non-Western central bank. If America can freeze your dollar assets at will, holding dollars is a geopolitical liability, not just a financial choice. The move from dollars to gold is the most honest signal in global finance right now. But it is only half the story. The other half is even more direct, because countries are not just moving away from dollars. They are actively constructing an entirely new financial system to replace it. Bypassing SWIFT, here is where the story takes a genuinely dark turn. Because what I am about to tell you is not speculation about what might happen someday in the distant future. This is infrastructure that already exists and is already processing billions of transactions, without a single American dollar involved. SWIFT is the messaging system connecting 11,000 banks across 200 countries, enabling international payments. For decades, it was the only game in town. And because America controls access to SWIFT, financial sanctions became Washington's most lethal economic weapon. Then Russia was removed from SWIFT in 2022, and China, watching that move very carefully, accelerated development of its own alternative, SIPS, the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System. As of 2024, SIPS connects over 300 financial institutions across more than 100 countries. The alternative exists now. The expanded BRICS bloc, now including Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, and the UAE, is developing a shared payment platform that bypasses SWIFT entirely. This is not theoretical. The architecture is being constructed while you watch this video. America's most powerful financial weapon is becoming obsolete in real time. When the dollar can be bypassed in trade and nations hold gold as backup, the only remaining support for dollar dominance is trust and history, especially the history of empires that believed their currency was permanent, is extraordinarily clear about what happens when that trust begins to erode, because this has all happened before. And the last time it happened, the collapse moved much faster than anyone expected. When Britain fell, if you thought that was disturbing, you are not ready for what history teaches us next, because the dollar is not the first reserve currency to die. It is simply the next one in a pattern that repeats across centuries. For nearly 200 years, the British pound was the world's reserve currency. Britain controlled global trade through its empire, its navy, and its banking institutions in the City of London. Sound familiar? Then came the Suez Crisis of 1956. Britain and France invaded Egypt to retake the Suez Canal after Nasser nationalized it. America, not consulted, not pleased, issued a quiet but devastating ultimatum: withdraw, or the US would dump British pound reserves on the open market, crashing the currency overnight. Britain backed down. Within months, the pound's reserve currency status was effectively finished. Empires are not defeated, they are abandoned, first by their creditors, then by their allies. What happened to British living standards after Suez? The pound lost over 30% of its purchasing power in the following decade. Imports became dramatically more expensive overnight. Interest rates spiked to painful levels. The welfare state Britain had built on decades of imperial financial leverage suddenly became unaffordable to maintain. The transition from reserve currency to ordinary currency feels sudden even when it builds for years. The pattern is historically identical to what we are watching with the dollar today. But there is one actor in this modern story that has studied the British collapse in extraordinary detail and built its entire 50-year strategy around never repeating Britain's mistake. And that is where this story gets genuinely chilling. China's master plan. But here is what nobody tells you. China's strategy to displace the dollar is not aggressive, it is patient. And in geopolitics, patience is a weapon more powerful than any military force. Since 2009, China has been systematically executing a multi-decade plan to position the yuan as a viable global reserve currency. The steps are deliberate, methodical, and each one builds on the last. 1. Become the world's largest trading nation by volume. 2. Create currency swap agreements with over 40 countries. 3. Launch yuan-denominated oil futures on the Shanghai Exchange. 4. Build SIPS to bypass SWIFT entirely. 5. Stockpile gold to give the yuan hard asset credibility. Each step alone seems modest. Together, they form an architecture specifically engineered to create a credible alternative to the dollar-dominated system. Slow, steady, unstoppable. The yuan's share of global trade financing jumped from near zero in 2010 to over 4% by 2023. Still small, but the trajectory is unmistakable and accelerating. China does not need to replace the dollar immediately. That was never the plan. It only needs to give countries a genuine choice. Because the moment the dollar is one option among several, rather than the only option, the entire equation changes. The 30% subsidy Americans have enjoyed for 80 years begins to dissolve. And the specific trigger I promised you at the start of this video, the mechanism that could snap this system suddenly rather than slowly, that comes next. And it is closer than you think. The day IT falls. Let me pause here, because this is the moment I set up at the very beginning of this video. The trigger, the open question I asked you to hold, the thing experts lower their voice when they say out loud. It is not a war, not a single market crash, not even the petrodollar ending. The trigger that ends dollar dominance is something far simpler, and it is already happening. Debt. America's national debt crossed $34 trillion in early 2024. Interest payments on that debt now exceed the entire U.S. defense budget. The Congressional Budget Office projects the debt-to-GDP ratio will reach 166% by 2054. At that level, America's largest creditors, Japan, China, the European Union, face an impossible choice. Continue holding dollar-denominated debt that pays real returns below inflation, or sell. If they sell, bond yields spike. Yields spiking means mortgage rates spike. Mortgage rates spiking means the housing market seizes. And the 2008 financial crisis becomes a dress rehearsal for what follows. Because unlike 2008, there is no external rescuer. The Federal Reserve cannot print its way out of a crisis caused by printing. The 30% subsidy Americans enjoy disappears not gradually, but suddenly and all at once. Your rent, your groceries, your car payment, your entire cost of living corrects upward by 30% in real terms, adjusting to what America's actual economic output genuinely deserves. This is not doom. This is arithmetic. Which nation do you think pulls the trigger first? Comment China or Europe right now. I want to know where you stand. And if this revelation shook you, share this video with every person you know. This truth needs to reach as many people as possible before it is too late to prepare. Your dollar future. Here is what I need you to understand before you close this video. The dollar's decline is not a conspiracy theory. It is history repeating. Every reserve currency in recorded history has eventually been replaced. The question was never if, it was always when. And more importantly, whether the people living through it were paying attention when the signals were still readable. Having now seen the de-dollarization data, the record gold purchases, the swift alternatives being actively constructed, the British precedent from 1956, China's methodical 15-year strategy, and America's accelerating debt trajectory, you know what to watch for. So what does this mean for you specifically? You cannot control global currency dynamics, but you can control your response to them. Financial advisors increasingly recommend what they call de-dollarization preparation, diversifying savings across assets that hold value independent of the dollar. Physical gold, real estate, foreign equities, commodities, not panic selling, not bunkers. Simply acknowledging that 80 years of artificial privilege cannot last forever, and that preparation is not pessimism, it is clarity. As John Maynard Keynes once warned, markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. The dollar's irrational dominance, sustained far beyond America's true economic weight, is ending on a timeline no one fully controls. You did not choose when this era began, but you can choose whether you understand it before it ends. And that choice, that moment of clear-eyed awareness, may be the most valuable thing you take from the next few minutes of your life. The dollar will not die with a bang. It will die the way every empire currency before it has died, with a long, quiet unraveling that most people dismiss as temporary until the morning they wake up and realize it was permanent. Slow then, sudden always. For 80 years, Americans have lived on a 30% discount, a subsidy paid by the rest of the world simply because the dollar happened to be the only game in town after 1945. That arrangement is ending, not because America is uniquely corrupt, not because China is uniquely powerful, but because no financial arrangement that defies arithmetic lasts forever. Britain discovered this in 1956. The Dutch discovered it in the 1700, the Spanish before that. And the pattern is always the same. Privilege breeds complacency, complacency breeds debt, debt breeds doubt, and doubt is the one thing a reserve currency cannot survive. An empire that cannot finance itself is no longer an empire. It is merely a debtor with a military. Knowing this is not a reason for despair. It is a reason for clarity. Every person who understood what was happening before it happened, who diversified, who prepared, who stopped assuming the present arrangement is permanent, navigated the transition with far less damage than those who were caught by surprise. The most dangerous assumption is that what has always been will always be. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, prove it. Comment petrodollar. That is the secret code for the few who actually paid attention. and who now understand what most people will only grasp when it is already too late. The truth is stranger than anything you could make up. If this changed how you see every price tag and every headline, hit subscribe, because next time it gets even more unsettling.